Reason number 46 to get a Nissan. Features, especially the ones you get with the 2025 Nissan Kicks Play. Integrated Apple CarPlay, a spacious interior, advanced safety features, and more room in your budget. Because it's the most affordable new vehicle in Quebec. Get the 2025 Nissan Kicks Play S from only $22,774, including a $2,600 cash purchase bonus. Visit your Nissan dealer today. Until March 2nd, conditions apply. Details at Nissan.
Moments away from Valerie Plante's press conference, sources have confirmed to CTV News that Valerie Plante will announce any moment now that she will not run for a third term. When Valerie Plante speaks at City Hall, you will hear it live on CJAD 800. For now, though, let's go to Bruce Myers. He may be a familiar voice to some of you listening right now, a former CJAD 800-er. CJAD, and he's the 13th bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Quebec. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Hi, Elias. It's good to be back on the air.
Yeah, tell me quickly here. Tell me about your CJAD chops. How long were you at CJAD?
I guess it was better part of 10 years. I started as the Ottawa Bureau Chief back in 1995, succeeding Mark Rennie. And that lasted a couple of years. And then in 97, I asked for a transfer to the National Assembly Bureau. And so continued there until the year 2000. And then in 2000, when our dear and beloved friend Mark Rennie of blessed memory grew ill, I took over hosting The World Today for about 6 months. And then after Mark died, a more permanent host was brought in, and then that's when I went off to seminary and took a completely different path to where I am today.
And my goodness, yeah, it certainly seems like a completely different path, knowing what I know about the radio business in my 6 years that I've been on air here. So, Bruce, that brings us to today's story. A group of people from the Anglican Church denied a reservation at the restaurant of the National Assembly. Tell us what happened here, Bruce.
Yeah, it's in a way a very ordinary story. So in the Anglican Church, we have things called synods, and those happen every few years, and those bring together clergy and lay people from our church, and we get together to pray and discuss and make decisions for the future of the church in Eastern and Central Quebec, in our case, for the next few years. And so there's one of these gatherings coming up at the end of this month, and we usually end it off with, a nice banquet, as you do. And we usually try to find a fairly decent venue for these banquets. And I remembered, having worked at the National Assembly for a few years, that there's a very nice restaurant called Le Parlementaire, which is in the midst of the parliamentary building. And they actively advertise for people to rent it out for corporate or private events like banquets and cocktails and such. And so I asked one of my colleagues, hey, let's see, what kind of deal they might be able to offer. Just send them an email asking, we've got 50 some odd people for a 3-course meal and a cash bar on these dates. A very ordinary request that we made to, another place as well. And what we got back a couple of days later, much to my surprise and confusion, was a very polite email saying, thanks for your request. Unfortunately, we can't consider it because we're not allowed to deal with so-called quote unquote religious movements, because that would somehow compromise the neutrality of the National Assembly. Uh-huh. And so how a group of, reasonably nice citizens of Quebec who happen to be members of the Anglican Church are going to compromise the neutrality of the National Assembly by eating some good food in a very nice restaurant was a bit beyond me, and felt a bit like an overreach, or at least a very extended interpretation of what laïcité or secularism is in Quebec.
So how do you characterize it in the sense, sometimes we hear stories about people trying to get health care in English, right? And there will be some overzealous frontline person that says, no, we cannot serve you in English, Bill 96, right? And as and then the story takes hold, next few days we find out it's an overzealous interpretation. In this instance, is it someone at the National Assembly who's like saying, we have Bill 21, we cannot possibly have you? Is it an overzealous interpretation more than anything else?
Well, we honestly don't know, and that's a great question to ask, and it's one of the outstanding questions. I found out yesterday indirectly from a journalist that, in fact, the National Assembly which is responsible for the restaurant because it's in the parliamentary precincts, has kind of backtracked on this and said some version of, and that's what was in the Le Devoir story this morning, that it was a misinterpretation by one of our employees, and in fact, that's not the policy. And so, it could be that, but one of my questions is, even if that's the case, this initial immediate no did not emerge out of a vacuum. The language that was used in the refusal kind of alluded to a kind of policy or practice. And I think we just need to get some answers because, one of the first things I did after the refusal came in that email was reread Bill 21 just to make sure that, in fact, no, this doesn't deal with restaurants. This deals with very specific cases of very specific people working within the Quebec Public Service. And so I do fear there may be something like creeping laïcité or something like that. And that's why I think we need to have some very clear parameters established around, what are the limits of laïcité, who establishes those, and can we have a conversation about that so that it's not kind of piecemeal and, as it seems in this case, even if it wasn't coming out of a bad place, kind of being made up as we go along.
Yeah, and the other thing is, do you feel it would have been different if it wasn't an event where, it was an organized event where there would be some sort of advocating for religion? And, we've heard other types of stories where the government revoked the use of a venue because a group was going to talk about their stance on abortion, right? So I'm just wondering.
They backtracked on that because they realized that was overreach and they actually can't do that. And so,
Bruce, are you there? Oh, did we lose Bruce? Bruce, are you there? Do you hear me? I guess we've lost Bruce. Let's try and get Bruce back on if we can.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, Bruce, you're there. Sorry, you got cut off.
Pardon. Something went wonky with my phone there.
That's okay.
So, the thing is, our initial request for the reservation made absolutely no allusion to the fact that we're a church or a religious organization. All we asked for, these dates, 3 courses, cash bar, what's possible. On the assembly side, they inferred, based, I'm presuming, on the email signature of my colleague and the email address from which the request was sent, that this was a religious organization. Now, is that the basis for a refusal? Obviously not. And, it's not about us. We've already found another venue and, it's not poor Anglicans can't have a nice meal somewhere. For me, it addresses and points to a larger question. What if the organized Jewish community wants to have a gathering in Le Parlementaire or another public space? Well, do they have to make a case that this isn't going to be a religious gathering? What if a local Muslim community or you name it? And who establishes these criteria?
Well, Bruce, listen, it's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing it with our listeners this morning. It's great to hear you back on the air, by the way. And we'll keep track of this, see what comes out. If there is a statement from the government where they fully backtrack or set some rules here, some parameters for this kind of stuff in the future.
Thanks for having me.
That's Bruce Myers. Thanks, Bruce. That's Bruce Myers, former CJAD 800 reporter and now the 13th Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Quebec.